of belonging to a group and caring and being concerned not only about your own feelings, which are important, certainly, but the feelings of other people. That other people are vitally important to your living a good life. And I hope that when you leave here, after the 2 exciting weeks that you're going to have, I would hope that some of this feeling, some of the feeling for people, and some of the love that you're going to feel up here too, gets through to you, and that you carry this on when you get back to the city. That you just don't cry your tears on the last day of camp, and then forget it. But that you remember some of the warm and exciting experiences that you had here. And the reason that they were good was because you were really sharing these with other people.
Time, oh time, where has he gone? Time, oh good, good time.
How do kids do 22 miles in one day without becoming a forced march? Probably because we run a non-competitive camp. We have no world records in the camp. We know the competition is part of everyday life, but so is pain. With pain being part of everyday life, we don't stick pins in children while they're young so they'll learn to live with pain. In the same way, we don't superimpose competition on them. And it's this kind of a feeling, it's this kind of a willingness to want to do things because they're exciting that makes this kind of a happening possible. Look, let me explain what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking this picture with everybody here. And so are they too. We are a collective people. We don't think in a particular way just by chance. We think that way because for the 3,500 years, a father has handed down to a son a way of thinking, and that son is handed to another son, and another son, and another son. And we've emerged as this continuity of peoplehood, as a part of it. When we finish tonight, we're going to sing Shalom. When we sing Shalom, let's think about really what it means. The word means hello, and all the warmth that people have for one another. It means goodbye, and all that means, and it especially means peace.
Probably Jerry's oldest friends. And I knew Jerry as a youth when he was very young. And I was very young. Jerry was about 3 years older than me. And he lived right across the street in City Terrace, a place that was found to be about 2 or 3 miles east of Boyle Heights. I feel greatly honored that you're all having me speak here about Jerry's earlier life. I met Jerry when he moved to City Terrace, across the street from where I lived. His mother and my mother, as most Jewish women, were members of the Socialist Party and accustomed to socialism as it was throughout the country. I can give you a summary of incidents that stand out in my mind. Remember Jerry as a very young person. His best friends were Red Alford, who was shot at a hot dog stand at a very young age, and later on, his friend Henry Bilton, who died of a heart attack at the age of 40. But Jerry went on to, at this time, he belonged to the AZA with us, and we're all part of a group of people at City Terrace. And he went on to a track meet there at Fairfax High, where he and two others, Jack Yalba and another friend, ran 3 races. He ran the 50-yard dash, and he also did the shot put. And he and his friend Jack Yalba ran the 100 to 200. And then the relays, he ran 2 of the 4 relays. He ran the first and the last, and the two others ran the 2 middle ones. He ran the first relay, and he ran the last relay. And City Terrace, AZA became the champion, won the championship for all the AZAs in Southern California. He then went on to be a busboy at Murrieta Hot Springs. And, you know, it's kind of a simple thing. And one night he went for a ride, in his car. We weren't old enough to drive in his car. Because we were only around 14, he was around 17, he had a car. And so he came down the hill, and all of a sudden he said, I ain't got no brakes in this thing. And we're going down the hill, we'll go about 40, then we'll go 50, we'll go 60, we'll go 70. He says, wait a second, I think I know what to do. And he saved us all. And we're thankful that he saved us all, because we then became friends. We all owe our lives to Jerry saving our lives. He had a great collection of swing records. And we'd go over his house and we'd listen to these swing records. And he knew all the players. He knew everybody there who played an instrument and all their names and what instruments they played. And also, I can remember one time he came back from the war. He had spent in World War II. He had spent some time. Came back with a dog, and he came out as a captain. And he and the dog were highly decorated. Both the dog was decorated and he was decorated. And he made the front page of the Los Angeles Examiner. He then went on to play some golf with a friend of his, and he made a hole-in-one. And he was a witness to the fact that Jerry made this hole-in-one while playing golf. And we all know that Jerry knows how to play golf, and he knew how to play it well. He went on to play. He played football at Wilson High, and then later on at City College. And then one time he was a very, very good athlete. There were 20 guys setting up some bleachers on the field at Wilson High, and he and his friend Henry and another fellow, Art Markell, who became an All-American, took on these 20 guys, these 3 guys, and they beat the hell out of them all 3. So we had a pinball machine in Bernie's Delicatessen, which was in the center of City Terrace. And I would lose my nickels all the time, because that's what it was, a nickel to play a pinball machine. Jerry would come in, not Jerry. Jerry would win all the money. We never saw the money, of course, like something else. But he went to Bernie and said, I won this one, get one again. And he would win again. Jerry was a true competitor, and we all admired Jerry. And when he became director of the Camp JCA, first at Malibu and later on in Martin Flats, I sent my kids there. We all sent our kids to have Jerry take care of it. And our kids grew up, all our kids grew up there at Camp JCA. We all loved him, and we truly all miss him, because we don't have him around us anymore. Thank you. Jerry was a Pied Piper. Not with the singing, but we would come up to camp, and he had this magnetism. And he would have all of his campers totally in awe of him. When we became staff, we knew a little more. He was artful at his, what should we call that? Bullshit. But this song is all about you. Came into town with his mandolin, calling all the people, and they came to him. He said, I want to hear all that's pretty. He said, I want to hear all that's nice. They laughed at him with his mandolin. They left him there with his funny grin. He said, you want to hear all that's pretty. He said, you want to hear all that's nice. The children of the town then came to him, magically called with his mandolin. He said, you want to hear all that's pretty. He said, you want to hear all that's nice. They smiled at him with his mandolin. Their eyes like his were sparkling. He said, you want to hear all that's pretty. He said, you want to hear all that's nice. They said, you want to hear all that's pretty. They said, you want to hear all that's nice. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Love you, Jerry.
My name is Andy Lipkiss. I'm a graduate of camp. I'm almost at a loss for words. I was doing fine until the video and then the song. This has been quite cathartic for me. I grew up at camp and it had a profound effect on my life. And I finished camp as a sort of a CIT, but I'm learning a lot about who I am today in ways that I couldn't, where I came from, in ways that I didn't understand, some of the forces. I'm one of those kids who sort of misfired in the program. I went to 5 or 6 years of camp, became a tasker, and that changed my life, and I'll get back to that in a second. I went on with the trajectory, became a CIT, and failed miserably. I did not want to be a counselor. I just didn't like it. And I really fought to not do counselor in training. That's what CIT was about. But I wanted to be the nature junior specialist, which was a violation of camp policy or something. And I practically had a sit-in, and they didn't let me do nature specialist. I had to be the pool specialist. But now I need to go back to one year back to TASC 1970, because it was there that summer that we learned from our camp naturalists and from the Forest Service that the forest was dying. We were told that smog from Los Angeles was coming up and killing the trees. And the job of TASC, the teenage service camp, the oldest kids in the camp, was to give something back to camp. And so we took it on ourselves as our project to replant the camp, and to start planting smog-resistant trees that wouldn't die when they breathed the smog. Now, I've told this story many thousands of times. People always want to know where I came from and where the work I do came from, and it was that moment. So we had an incredible summer doing what, if anybody didn't know, they would think we were youth prisoners. We were, well, what do the kids do in the probation camps all over town? They swing picks, they break rocks, they shovel manure. And that's what we did for 3 weeks. And that remains the best summer of my life. Seriously. After 3 weeks of breaking rocks and shoveling cow shit. Cow manure in 105-degree temperature with Larry and a bunch of us down way down in the valley. We brought it back, we sowed it into the ground, we created the new slushy meadow right in the middle of camp. We created a meadow. We brought new life back to camp, and we dedicated the meadow with 300 campers around us, and we saw critters come back to what had been a dead piece of parking lot. And as a 16-year-old, it was life-changing to have heard people say you can make a difference, but feel that they really didn't believe it. And to see, though, with our hands that we could, it changed my life. And that I, like so many kids at camp, that last day, with crying, heard Jerry's words say, well, if this felt good to you, make it real. Back at home, make it real back in the city. And I took him seriously. I thought he meant it. And so I got back to high school and started figuring out how I could plant more trees and get more kids to swing picks and break rocks and discover their power and their ability to do healing. And I tried and failed at that for 3 years, and then finally it hatched, and I launched the organization that is known today as Tree People. Thank you. It was just sitting here today, hearing the story that you told about, who was it that couldn't make it? It was Diane. I realized I had an incredible life crisis somewhere, I think, between high school and college, and it brought back. Because of camp, I went out on a path where nobody had been. I thought I was, as a child of this community, meant to grow up to be a doctor, a lawyer, or some professional. And I found myself doing this stuff with trees, which was weird by any account. And I literally found myself out on a limb. It truly was a crisis, because there was no role model for this, and I was breaking all tradition. And environment was a word that really wasn't yet known. And I was having a meltdown, and Jerry came to get his glasses adjusted at my dad's office, and took my hand. I mean, I say this in a funny way, but it was a very lonely, very, very scary time. I felt like I could fall off the world, having just dropped out of college to pursue this weird thing. And that was, what a moment. And I didn't remember that till today. So thank you for sharing that. My purpose in talking today was really to give high confidence that Jerry lives on by the millions and millions. And my story is just one of thousands of kids, tens of thousands who were touched. But where Tree People has gone, aside from planting trees in Los Angeles, just very, very quickly, we did organize a campaign to plant 1 million trees in Los Angeles. That inspired a campaign to plant 200 million trees in Australia. I also went down there to help share that and get it going. That's where I met my wife. People are eating in 4 African countries, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Kenya, the Cameroon. They're eating fruit and fruit trees because we airlifted fruit trees to all those countries during the famine in 1988. And as famines return, the trees tend to live because they can make it through the drought. And that's just more of Jerry giving and giving. And we continue to give out fruit trees to hungry families in Los Angeles all the time. We've built the largest environmental education program in the country, touching sometimes 1 million kids a year here in Los Angeles. Those kids, I guess this is part of the power of this story. Those kids went on to help build Los Angeles' curbside recycling program. Well, that sounds like pretty boring stuff, you know? But at the time, our city fathers did not believe that the people of Los Angeles would recycle. Those of you who remember Sandy Whitney. Talking about trash was tantamount to political suicide. What we had to do is go out to the kids and charge them to say, we're going to fix this city, it's going to be you. Very much the same words I heard from Ken. That if we're going to save this forest, it's going to be you kids who do it. LA Kids made the citywide recycling program happen. And it became the largest in the country, probably the largest in the world, which then caused tens of thousands of other cities to take on recycling. Back the power of the kids. The story goes on, and there's a lot of hope being sowed in very mundane areas like LA's sewage treatment and water supply system now. But let me tell you, the work lives on as we bring a forest into Los Angeles to help heal the city. I had the occasion, though, to be up at at Barton Flats just 2 weeks ago. And I couldn't get into camp because it was snowed in. But it's a strange part of the story, and it helps me wrap up today. Back in 1970, when we heard the word that the trees were dying, they told us that the forest as we know it would be dead by the year 2000 if nothing was done, if you kids don't do something. So we did. We began planting smog-resistant trees. By the year 2000, the forest was alive and thriving. Did they give us a doomsday report back then? Did we do stuff that changed things? It's not clear. Smog got better because we all got mobilized and passed laws. But now, 3 years later, that forest, as we know it, is nearly gone. If you've been to the San Bernardino forest, it's dying very fast. The trees around camp are going. It gives me, pride is the wrong word, but we started planting smog-resistant trees and drought-tolerant trees. And sure enough, I was able to find trees that we planted all around the mountainside. They are 40 feet tall and thriving amongst the trees that were being killed then by the bark beetles, being killed by the smog. The same thing had gone on, and now it's drought and smog that is killing that forest. But the trees that we planted are living. And we don't know what's happening with that forest. Is it climate change? Is it global warming? Something must be done, and something is being done. We are redoubling our efforts to replant that forest and the forests that are now part of our community, our life support system. So it gives me some pleasure to tell you that all these trees that are here for you to plant, and I think we're going to talk about it later, represent smog-tolerant, drought-tolerant trees that will live in this climate. But also, we're starting a grove for Jerry that I hope that we'll plant in Martin Flats, but the leadership team here, whoever is part of that, will figure out where we're going to put the trees. And I want to present this to the family, just a certificate of the start. So we start to plant trees to continue to give life to more and more generations. I can't say thanks enough for my life to Jerry. So, thank you.
Okay, I got my little sunglasses in case I blow it. But, I just want to go back. A long time ago at camp, I was a big kid. And Jerry kicked our butts every year. Us, they got beat. But going back to when I was a little kid, my family moved from Boyle Heights in the East Side Jewish Community Center to West Los Angeles in 1952. And this is one of those mental Kodak moments that I have no idea why I remember this situation as it happened so vividly. But when we moved out to West Los Angeles, my mother and my aunt, I don't know, took me to the Beverly Fairfax Jewish Community Center. We walked in, and this guy walks the other side of the pool, comes around, and I can see him right now. He comes around, and he introduces himself as Jerry Ringerman. Okay, and I've never forgotten that moment. That was the beginning of hundreds and hundreds of stories that I was personally involved with Jerry. And everybody here has hundreds and hundreds of stories that began at whatever time in the past. And I was on the phone last week talking to how he was in Israel. And I told him this story, and he said, wow, when my mom and dad took me to the Beverly Fairfax Jewish Community Center for the first time, we walked over to the pool, and I had that Kodak moment, in my mind, and how he had kind of an aqua moment, because Jerry pushed him in the pool. And then taught him to swim. And we've been listening to all these stories tonight. And really what I wanted to say was that there are so many Jerry Ringerman, wonderful, sentimental, beautiful stories that we have and we have to share. And as much as camp was a non-competitive camp, I challenge everybody in here to be as competitive as you can be in telling these stories. Because when I was listening to Larry Messenger tell a story, I couldn't wait for him to finish because my story was better. And I'm sure that Rick Holton couldn't wait for me to finish because his story was better. And we all have better stories. And the more we tell these stories, the closer Jerry is to us. And it's almost like Jerry went on a lion hunt, he just hadn't come back. And the more we tell these stories, the closer he's going to be to us. And that's really what I wanted to say today. That don't stop today, tomorrow, the next day. Call everybody, email, keep in touch, and continue to tell these stories. And Jerry will always be there. And I've got a million stories, and I don't want to take up your time. Just grab me and I'll tell you later on. But I do want to say that I just love everybody here, and everybody here loves everybody. And that's just so special, and it's all because of Jerry.
My name's Andy Gross. I'm proud to be a dear friend of Jerry's. This is my family. And come on up, guys. Let's start with Grandma.
Dear friends, allow me to say a few words that is in my heart for a very long time. 34 years ago, my newly married son, Andy, and his wife, Carol, arrived to California all alone, not knowing anyone in the great big city. When they really needed a friend, Jerry and Eileen became the friends for them. And the friendship became and grew into the relationship we all treasure ever since. We celebrated the arrivals of the children, their success, joined us in holidays, and when I came, the friendship were extended to me too. We enjoyed the company of a brilliant man and his great sense of humor. Our life was enriched by knowing him. He will live forever in our hearts. Goodbye, Jerry.
My name is Andrea. Jerry and Eileen are not related by blood to my family, but in our hearts, which is really all that matters. They've always been the closest of family to me. I don't think I can even imagine growing up without them. Some of my fondest childhood memories will always be with the time spent with Jerry and Eileen. And whenever I think of the years of Thanksgivings with my family, I will always think of Jerry. For as long as I can remember, he has always been there for every family gathering, including both my brother and my sister's graduations. And though he will not physically be there for mine, he will be there in my heart. I'm thankful to be able to have been able to spend the time with him that I have, and I'm thankful to Jerry for being part of my life and for inspiring me to become a better person. About a month ago, I was in an interview, and I was asked to name a hero of mine. The first person that came to my mind was Jerry. He was the kind of person that lived life to its fullest, no regrets. He stood up for what he believed in, followed his heart, and did great things. He was also one of the kindest, sincerest, most compassionate and caring people I've ever met. He's the kind of person that blessed the world with his presence and made it a better place just by being a part of it. I'm sure that everyone here today knows that and has their own fond memories of Jerry. I'd like to share one of mine, an experience that has inspired me in so many ways. About a year ago, my mom and dad and I met Jerry and Eileen at Disneyland. Even though he was sick, he loved to have fun, and they decided to join us. As soon as we got there, we all greeted each other, and of course, Jerry and Eileen asked my parents and I how we were doing. Jerry and I asked for an update on the various activities I was involved in, and for minutes we discussed these. And then he asked me, "But are you happy? Are you really happy?" From that moment on, I realized not only what a truly caring person he was, but also that he really knew what was important in life. He helped me realize that living a great life is not just about success and accomplishments, but is also about the happiness that you bring to both yourself and to others. Someone famous once said, "Do not fear death, but rather the unlived life." You don't have to live forever, you just have to live. Jerry really lived. He had a great life, no regrets. I miss him dearly, but at least I know that he was happy and satisfied with his life. Jerry, you will always have a special place in my heart, and while I know not where we go after death, I hope that we will meet again one day.
I'm going to read a note that my other daughter, Anna, wrote about Jerry when, unfortunately, she couldn't make it to this event. But she wanted to relate her feelings to Eileen and everybody else here. Jerry and I have a history that goes back to before I was born. He and my mom bet dinner over who could lose more weight in a month. Jerry won the bet. My mom found out she was pregnant. My parents took Jerry and Eileen out to dinner. Luckily, Jerry was a gracious winner and they returned the favor. Over the next year, Jerry and I had the best conversations I'll ever remember. Apparently, we used to drive around in the car in San Francisco, and he and I would sit in the back seat saying goo goo gaga for an hour. Not too much has changed over the years. Jerry knew something about everything, so he got along well with our know-it-all family. He used to make comments at Thanksgiving dinner that would incite my uncle into these huge arguments. But the funny thing was that Jerry was just having a good time. He loved to argue. It was a sport for him, and he was a pro. And I don't know if my uncle ever figured it out, but the rest of us sure had several laughs about it. Jerry was always a performer, a storyteller. He always had center stage. He was one of the most engaging, energetic people I know. He had been at almost every graduation, birthday, or special occasion with my family, and has always had something witty to say. Even the numerous friends I've had at these gatherings have always said that they liked the old guy with the raspy voice. Sometimes they asked if he was my granddad with that hot younger woman. He sort of was, only more fun. When my dad asked if I wanted to say a few words on my behalf about Jerry, I had a really tough time at first. I still have trouble believing that he's truly gone from this world because in my mind, he's still here. Jerry was such an active, energetic guy who lived life to its fullest. He had a long, fruitful time on this earth, and I would bet he had no regrets. He had a wonderful, beautiful life and had experienced such a variety of things that most people couldn't even dream of. He was a happy-go-lucky person and an optimist. Jerry, I miss you, I love you, I'm so very glad that you have been part of my life and have taught me to live life to its fullest in every moment. Lastly, I don't want to forget that wonderful woman, Leanie, who lit up Jerry's life the most. You two were the most perfect couple. You were role models to me in my own relationships.
Thank you for letting me say a few words about my dear friend Jerry. I'm going to have to read them because it's kind of tough. I met Jerry in the locker room of the Jewish Community Center in San Francisco around 1974. He used to play a lot of handball then, and a mutual friend provoked us into a challenge match. We were both jocks and competitive, found we had similar political and social values, and we hit it off. We used to meet with our small group of friends at the JCC after work, went to dinner, did a lot of weekend activities together. A few years later, Jerry retired, and he and Eileen moved to Florida to pursue a job opportunity. Carol and I moved here to Los Angeles. Happily, they left Florida and moved back to LA where we were reunited. We always shared two holidays, Passover and Thanksgiving, together. We were a little light on ceremony, heavy on friends and food and wine. And Jerry delivered an annual speech which was about love of humankind, love of knowledge, and inclusion. You all know that Jerry was intensely competitive, and forgive me if I repeat something my daughter actually wrote. Here's my version. Once when both Jerry and Carol were putting on weight, he challenged Carol to a weight loss contest. Jerry won and proudly collected on the bet, which was dinner for four at a very nice restaurant in San Francisco. We found out a few days later that Carol was pregnant with our first child, Anna. Jerry was, as most of you know, an excellent handicapper. Jerry loved to have fun, and he was a bigger kid than anybody. A few months after our daughter Anna was born, we all went to Lake Tahoe for the weekend. Again, this is my version of the story, which my dear daughter was too young to remember. One of Jerry's lesser-known accomplishments was fluency in baby talk. In fact, he and Anna entertained us with baby talk, including finger-sucking and drooling, for most of the 4.5-hour ride home. More recently, I remember him swing dancing with Anna and Jason in our living room. They actually came over, they were trying to teach me how to dance. Here I am, you know, an adult with a whole family, and I don't know how to dance. But the kids and Jerry, they were great. Jerry enjoyed nice things, but he was not materialistic, and he was incredibly generous, both with gifts and especially with his time. My son Jason remembers when Jerry came to the house with a beautiful new luxury car. He was about 7 years old at the time. I think it was a burgundy-colored Infiniti with fresh-smelling leather seats. He took Jason and me for a ride, and we drove into the Santa Anita parking lot. Jerry pulled over and handed Jason at age 7 the key. There seems to be a pattern here. Jason sat in my lap and drove us home with his heart thumping away. I could feel the little guy's heart. He still remembers that wonderful event. Jason recalled recently how much fun he had with Jerry when they went to play golf, which was Jason's first time. Jerry complimented him lavishly, and he was so proud. Recently, Jason went to a function at a prestigious law firm in Portland, where he dressed in a suit and tie. He was already out of the house when he remembered and ran back inside to get his pen. Jason remembers Jerry telling him, "A thinking person always carries a pen." Jerry felt responsible to do things for people, and his social conscience was a part of his essential makeup. He also instilled this sense of social responsibility in others. A few months ago at a gathering that some of you, his dear friends, attended, he was asked what he thought about the Kobe Bryant trial. He immediately declared that it's taking attention away from our president, the war, and the current world crisis. He inspired us to read about political and social issues so that we were responsible too. Occasionally, he made me aware of my own subtle prejudices, but he did it in a way that never made me feel ashamed. Jerry was a moral compass to many of us, but he was never moralistic. A few years ago, I saw the movie Playing by Heart with Sean Connery and Gene Rollins. After 40 years of marriage, Paul reveals that he had an affair with a young woman that worked with him years ago. Hannah, who suspected something was wrong at the time, was hurt and outraged by the revelation. Was she more attractive or a better lover than me? Was she a better companion? Was it because she was younger? It was none of those things, Paul said. I've always loved you, he tells Hannah, but I liked who I was in her eyes. Jerry made me feel good about myself, and I liked who I was in his eyes. During the past 3 years, Jerry and I spoke occasionally about his illness, and he was quite aware of and accepted the logical conclusion. He always maintained that he led a full and wonderful life and had no regrets. I know that he was completely truthful and sincere about that. So I salute Jerry, and with his extended family here, I celebrate his life.
Hello, my name is Ruben Artwilovich, and it's an honor to be here. I was a lifetime camper in many ways at Camp JCA in the 1970s, and then later on in the 1980s and early 1990s had the wonderful blessing to work as the camp director, as the assistant director, and then later as the camp director. When I think of Jerry Ringerman, I think Lador, from generation to generation, and I think of legacy. As many of us have attested to today, he has left such a legacy, and so many of us who grew up with him, and in the next wave, the next generation after him, continue to shape life as it is today. So much of who I am and who many of us are today, we know because of Jerry's gifts. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to work with Jerry on a couple of programs, but mostly the opportunity to just sit with him. And especially in my earlier years as a camp director, I cherished the time that we had together. Today I continue to live those blessings working as the camp directors for Camp Swig and Camp Newman. But as I share with all my camp colleagues, Camp JCA continues to be my heart camp. There's one story that resonates with me that wasn't specifically from Jerry, but was from the time of Jerry. I was an avid Camp JCA Sierra trip camper. I went 7 years in a row on the Camp JCA Sierra trips. And after 7 years, at the end of one of these trips, the leader of the group took a rock, and I always remember Jerry with his famous closing circles. In fact, one time I had the opportunity to officiate a closing circle with Jerry. But in this particular case, after the rock would be passed around from camper to camper, and each of us would share what we had learned and the friends we had made, and we'd all be crying. And the counselor took the rock and tossed it on the ground by a tree. And I was 12 years old, and I picked up that rock and I kept it with me. And to this day, that rock sits on my desk as a paperweight. I want to take an opportunity at this moment to publicly acknowledge somebody else who's in this room with us right now. If Jerry was the patriarch of many, many of us, both personally and professionally, myself, Ken Kramars, Judy, Bill, Joel, Saul, others, then a woman who I consider the matriarch of Camp JCA is Zena Tendis. And Zena, for those of you who don't know, was the registrar with Jerry and many of us for how many years?
Totally 27.
27 years. And to bring it all back, to tie it all together, I was a camper at Camp JCA when Zena was the registrar, and when I came to interview as the camp assistant director, she was still the registrar, and she remembered my address. And maybe it had to do with the name Arquilovich, but I don't know. Bill Kaplan, who you'll hear from next, is an absolute jewel. And I just would like to share that Camp JCA is in wonderful, wonderful hands. Bill and I worked together in the late 80s and early 90s, and we continue to have a friendship and collegial relationship. He is so humble. He is so humble and so open to learning that when he came and wanted to live the dream of working with Camp JCA, the only opportunity I had at that time was that of registrar, because Zena had just left. And he said, you know what, there's no better way to learn about camp than to play that role and to be the voice and the gateway to all those families, all those parents, all the children, all the staff. The other thing that Bill has is vision. I remember it over and over and over again. Bill has vision. So I encourage all of you to continue to do this holy work, to join Bill and his wonderful team, Joel, Saul, Brandy, Brooke, Casey, I don't know, Bill, I'm sure will maybe mention your names. It's beautiful to see that the seeds of Jerry continue to flourish today. Thank you for this opportunity of being with all of you.
Well, I want to thank Zena for leaving after 27 years because I took her job and able to be in this place today. I'm going to be brief and very quickly, my family started with Camp JCA in 1972 with my sister of mine going to camp and coming off the bus, or actually my parents dropped her off and was crying incessantly, and Jerry came over and did what a good camp director does and made sure that she stayed at camp. The next year, my older sister is in the room right now. Came back, that was 1972. That year, there was 1973, and the Kaplan family became the Camp JCA family. I grew up living Camp JCA with the younger brother, and I was sort of a homebody day camp boy, but I spent a couple years at camp. I really had a chance to get to know Jerry when I became the director. And now I'm going to read. It's hard. In 1990, after returning from a year in Israel, I wanted to work in the Jewish community. To my sisters and my surprise, I ended up in the Camp JSA office. 4 years later, I became the director. One of the first things I did when I became the director was call Jerry, the camp legend, the guru. Right away, Jerry became a mentor to me, the camp version of Yoda. We would often meet for lunch or talk on the phone, whether it was a camper issue, staff issue, or personal issue. Jerry would always take my call and spend time working the issue out with me, even the last few months. There are many bits of advice, tidbits of camp wisdom, Jerryisms that have got me through many, many hard times at camp. My staff knows many of those, and there's one I'm not going to share today because I'm not going to share that. But it's definitely a Jerryism. The week that Jerry passed away, I was in Orlando for 2 conferences, and one was the JCC Resident Camp Directors Conference. It happened to be a couple days before Jerry passed away. Ken Kramars came down, and actually the first day and said, I have something for you. He brought this. There it is. It's the camp director shirt that Jerry gave to Ken when he first became the director of Camp Tawonga, kind of passing on the legacy of what camp embodies and what camp is all about. And this will be the first item that will be the frame and put in the place that you may have seen outside called Jerry's Place at camp. I'm going to miss Jerry. Jerry, I'll miss you as your colleague, your mentee, and your friend. I thank you for what you have given to us that sit in this room and to the tens of thousands who have been directly or indirectly influenced by you. I'm happy that I got to know you, and I'm proud to carry on your legacy at camp. Thanks.
This is what happens when you don't do what Jerry tells you to do. Hi, I'm David Epstein. It was a long time ago. I was in my first year of law school. I saw an ad to be a unit head at a camp. I thought, oh, this will be great. I can spend the summer up in the mountains. And I had been, for the 2 past years, I had worked as a counselor at a day camp for the YMCA. We went over to a park in Beverly Hills and we just played sports for a few hours. I figured that qualified me to be a unit head. So I interviewed. I don't know what it was that caused Jerry to invite me to join the camp family. We bonded rather quickly because I'll never forget it. The first meeting, there they are talking about group-centered camping. I mean, my face is blank. And CITs and taskers. I hadn't the foggiest idea what was going on. And Jerry finally, at a break, pulled me aside and he gave me the best advice I ever received from anyone in my whole life. And that was, David, fake it. And I've tried to follow that throughout my whole life. We became friends. In fact, Jerry was like a brother to me. And we bonded so quickly because after a month and a half at camp, there was a 3-day break to go down to San Diego and have a few days off. And there I am, I'm 15 years younger than Jerry. I'm fresh off the track team in Berkeley. And we're out there in the sand having a broad jumping contest. That's what it was called then. Now the long jump. And Jerry jumps almost 19 feet in the sand, sailing over my mark by at least a foot. And He said he knew he could beat me at one thing, and that started our relationship, and we remained very, very close friends for the rest of our life. I became involved with the camp's board. I went on the board of directors of JCA. With Jerry at my side and mentoring me, I became president of Camp JCA. Under my term there, several terms in fact, we raised the money for the Malibu Zoo. And we remained friends right to the very final minute. Let me share a couple of things that you don't know about Jerry, because I think they're important. Not only was he competitive, but he was a good athlete. He was one of the best. And it was across all sports. And there was mentioned that he played football, and he had to be all-city in football. And he played professional football in Canada. And in track, he was simply outstanding and held city records. But it wasn't just that. One day, I happened to be over at Jerry's house, and the almanac is around, and I happen to be thumbing through it. And I look in the index, and I see Jerry Ringerman's name, and I thumb to the page where they note that he was the catcher on the World Championship softball team when he was in the military service. Now here's one thing I'm sure that almost nobody in this room is aware of. Jerry was a professional boxer. He wisely retired after being knocked out in his second bout. He competed with his mind as well. Jerry was a California State chess champion and a life master in bridge, and I was fortunate to be his partner. And he was just an outstanding bridge player. And we played many, many tournaments until one day the person sitting to the right of me threw his cards at his partner across the table, and that just ended our bridge forever. Jerry also was a playwright. I didn't know this until probably 8 or 9 years ago. He wrote a play, and it was so good that Robert Altman twice optioned the play. Unfortunately, because it was too difficult to technically accomplish this story of co-joining twins, they never made a film about it, although there is a film that came out recently, which I don't think was based on his play. He is undoubtedly one of the best horse race handicappers that there ever was. And now I can reveal that the reason that the board of directors meetings at Camp JCA ended promptly at 9:30 p.m., this was once a month, was so that Jerry and I could go out to Hollywood Park and catch the last 2 harness races. The last chapter in Jerry's life is the most revealing, the one which defines him. About 3 years ago, Jerry was diagnosed with inoperable double lung cancer. For everyone but Jerry, that would have been the end of their life. Jerry took on this horrific illness as a challenge, another contest to win. He had had too many golf games left to quit now. His friends at Los Alamitos racetrack needed his uncanny handicapping skills, and more importantly, there were many more moments to be shared with his devoted wife and soulmate, Eileen. Not once did chemo and radiation keep Jerry from golf or the racetrack. Without ever a single complaint, and with the constant support of Eileen, he endured the rigors and agony of these life-prolonging treatments. And special thanks to his doctor, who nurtured instead of abandoning him, and Jerry survived. Not too long ago, Jerry and I planned a day of golf and the racetrack. Picture this. Jerry has his oxygen on the golf cart. Every step is arduous, but he's going to play 18 holes. He is upset with his play off the tee box and is disgusted with his short game and putting. He cannot understand why he no longer can play par golf. On one hole, he hits a shot into a deep sand trap. I want to pick up the ball and place it on the fairway for him. No, he yells. He goes in the trap, makes a beautiful shot, and struggles out, almost exhausting himself. Later, we go to the racetrack, and he wins as usual. But his thirst for life does not end there. Shortly afterward, Eileen and Jerry take a trip to Las Vegas. There's Jerry at the Venetian Palace Hotel, positioned at the end of a crap table, sitting on a scooter, with his ever-present oxygen tank filling his lungs with life. A crowd is gathered because Jerry has been throwing the dice for 45 minutes. He wins $19,000. Jerry, my dear, dear friend, yes, you did beat the odds. And the grace with which you did it defines you and your life.
Eileen and Debbie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm really glad that you're all here to share this day with us. I don't have anything prepared, and I'm not going to be long here. You've been very patient in staying through all of this. What I'd like to share is a little bit about my dad, what it was like for Jerry to be my dad when I was growing up. And much of it you've heard already. But the thing that was most important, that had the greatest impact on my childhood and later my adulthood, was my dad's incredible joy and lust for life. And that filtered down to every tiny task and every little event and every small incident. He would make me do things that I didn't want to do. I wanted to go out on Saturdays and Sundays and hang out with my friends, but I had to learn the opera Carmen. I had to sit through the whole thing, and I had to learn it, and I had to hear the entire story, and I would be upset. But I know Carmen. Today I know Carmen. On Sunday mornings, we would listen to gospel on the radio, and I love gospel today. And I loved going to the horse races. We would go to the infield. We never sat in the grandstand then. We would go to the infield and we'd be there all day. And he would go back and forth making bets, and my brother and I would just run the racetrack. We would be all over the place. These are some of the things that he taught me. He taught me to take big risks. He taught me not to be afraid. He taught me to get hurt and try again. Can't tell you the number of times many of you witnessed me getting thrown off a horse or a horse falling on me, only to be thrown back up on the horse the next day. I still take big risks in my life. My father gave me compassion for people. Took me a long route, but today I'm a social worker, and I hope in my own way I'm giving back some of the things he taught me to give. I want to just tell you a little story, and then I'm going to let Lean talk. One of the things that I always hoped was that this legacy and this wonderful gift that my father had of making life exciting and wonderful would be something that I could pass on to my son Jordan, who's right here. And I think that it became clear that I had on a day that I know Eileen remembers very well, when all of us, my father and Eileen and Jordan and I, when Jordan was 3 years old, went to a bakery, just a nice bakery in Oakland called Merritt Bakery. And Eileen and my dad and I watched, amazed, as Jordan became absolutely thrilled and excited over the wedding cakes in the bakery. This was like a major deal, and there was just a glimpse that went between my father and I, and between Eileen and I, and between my father and Eileen, and we said, yes, the legacy is passed on. This child, too, finds joy in everything. So that's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I am determined to do this, so bear with me. On several occasions, Jerry told me that when the time came, he did not want a funeral. He wanted a party. He wanted his friends and family to gather and to eat a little, drink a little, tell some jokes, and then say that Jerry was a good guy. And I think we know he was a good guy. And this party today was so beautifully and creatively organized by Larry and by Nick. And they were so ably assisted by Donnie and David and Mitch, who told me he couldn't sit Shiva with me, but has called me about every other night since Jerry passed away, and I'm so appreciative of his friendship. I want to share a short memory with you that typifies some of Jerry's qualities that made our years together a very lasting love affair. With ever-growing affection, fun, and adventure. I only spoke recently of this to one person that was fairly recently, and that was Debbie. I'm afraid she has to listen again. Jerry was a great dancer. Ballroom dancing, jive, jitterbug, dirty dancing. It didn't matter. He was accomplished with all of them. He learned to dance from his older sister, who was a serious dance student and needed a partner, and Jerry was, as a younger brother, confiscated and made to dance with her. We did not seek out dancing as an activity for an evening, but whenever we were at an event such as a wedding or we were traveling and dancing was an option, we were always on the dance floor. And Jerry was very flamboyant and put on a real show for everybody. He would always end dances with my engaging in a very deep back bend, which he directed with great panache and drama, and I was always quite pleased to be returned to the vertical position and not a horizontal heap on the floor. On New Year's Eve, when we lived in San Francisco, Jerry insisted on several occasions that we don formal wear. He would get into a tux, and I would get into a gown, and we would proceed after dinner to go downtown and crash the private parties at the Fairmont and the Markham. He always told me that people wouldn't mind, that they wanted us to come, and they wanted us to drink their liquor, and they wanted us to dance. I was never particularly comfortable with this arrangement, but we did it. Not too long ago, while dancing, Jerry said, 30 years of going backwards, unbelievable. And I said, what do you mean? He said, didn't you notice that I'm always going backwards and you're always going forwards? And I said, no, I thought that was, I don't know, all dancing. I grew up with the jitterbug and all that stuff. And he said, well, I noticed that you were having difficulty going backwards, and I didn't really know that I was really doing it the wrong way. And I said, well, why are we doing this? Why am I going backwards all the time? And he said that he knew that I was shy by nature, not comfortable being within the gaze of many persons whom I did not know, and also noticed that going backward was not a natural skill for me. He didn't make an issue of it, but simply decided that dancing backwards was okay. And I, of course, became very indignant with this statement and said, of course I can go backwards, what are you talking about? But
With sincere effort and with his great dexterity in leading me, I did do a couple of steps going backwards quite successfully, but I have to tell you it was really hard. And I will never know whether it was my real inability at dancing or whether I just learned to go frontwards all the time, and for 30 years I couldn't master to go backwards. We managed to have great fun with our endeavors on the dance floor and frequently received comments on how lovely we danced together. We were asked even if we were professional dancers. So I don't think that the world noticed that I was going frontwards all the time. I am sharing this memory with you because it exemplifies some of Jerry's qualities and characteristics that many of you were touched by. He was exciting, totally unintimidated, fun, and as you asked me to stretch and to grow with his love and support. He was thrilled with my accomplishments, no matter how minor, and supportive when results were less than what I had hoped for. He never failed to be my best friend, my most ardent supporter, my sweet partner in our long love affair together. And while we are so saddened by his absence, we will all have many rich, sustaining, and wonderful memories to comfort us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Needless to say, we have a dream. Our dream is called Jerry's Place. Hopefully you saw a rendering of Jerry's Place outside in the lobby. For each of you here today, there is, on the edge of the stage, a pine tree. You can take the pine tree home and you can plant it. Hopefully that pine tree will grow just as we all have grown, and it will remind you of Jerry and our whole family. David Epstein and his lovely wife Jane had made a commitment and have donated, and I'm not going to give you a number, but it's multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars. And David and Jane challenge us to match their donation. And with that money, we will build, and I am committed to this, and I will not stop working on this until it's done. We will create Jerry's Place. So whatever you might be able to do, whatever, it will be appreciated. So on your way, pick up a tree. There actually are instructions on the table outside how to plant that tree, because we certainly don't want anything to happen to it. And there's a little solicitation card attached. Again, whatever you might be able to do, Dave and Jane are going to match that, and we're going to make this happen. Thanks a lot.
Jerry had died. It's called In the End.
If I could still reach out and touch you, I would tell you how much you have meant to my life, and as such, you will always be here in the end. We said goodbye, I'd have kissed you and told you how much I would miss you. But you'll remain in my heart, and for this
sky and the sun.
In the end,
In the end,
we are one.
we are one.
In the end,
In the end, we are one.
when it's all said and done. In the end,
In the end,
we are one.
we are one.
We are one.
We are
In the end, all we have is each other. We are all sisters and brothers. It's the love that we give to another that means everything in the end. In the end, we are one. Like the sky and the sun. In the end,
In the end,
we are one.
we are one.
We are one. In the end, we are one. When it's all said and done. In the end,
In the end,
we are one.
we are one.
We are
We
one.
are one.
When we have to close, when we have to finish, there was two things at camp that we would never ever fail to do. The first was to acknowledge the fact that nothing can happen, nothing, not a meal, anything can happen without people doing some work to get it done. So I'd like to take a second now, and will all of us take a second to thank Donnie for putting together the music and all of the arrangements physically that you see, and for Larry and for Mick, who worked on the program, and for Dave, who helped to host, and for Eileen and Debbie, who hosted us tonight. So thank you very, very much. We don't necessarily have to do the Herzog soup, right? Remember that way of thanking. I want to remind everybody that we did, through Andy, we did bring trees, major project. We brought trees as a gift, right? It's a gift. So everybody will decide from this moment on in their own way. And this is part of the message of camp, of not leaving anything at camp, and we won't leave anything here. When we leave today, everyone will decide in their way how we go on from here, and how we take the memories and take the stories, and take the messages and take the impact, and carry it on and apply it from now on, and never forget. So we'll take a tree, and we'll do what we can in the rest of our lives to keep the memory and the messages that Jerry gave us and the impact that he had on us always alive. And they'll always, 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 always be with us. And then we never, ever finished anything just by talking. So I'm going to ask Donnie to come back one more time, and we'll sing a couple songs together. Donnie. Thank you.
I know everyone's been so patient. Cindy, Haley, and Jane Post. Where are you, Jane? Maybe you'll come help us sing 2 songs. All right, where am I?
it's impossible to have a day celebration for Jerry and have it cut short. What can we say? Everyone had so much to say. Okay, ready? Are you getting close? All right, here we go. This little light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. Every day, every day, every day, every day, I'm gonna let my little light shine. They gave me the gift of love. Today came from above. They told me to have more faith. Tuesday gave me a little more faith. Friday told me watch and pray. Saturday told me what to say. And gave me the power to bind. Let my little light shine. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. Every day, every day, every day, every day, gonna let my little light shine. The light that shines is the light of love. That's the darkness from above. Shines on me and shines on you. Shows the power of love and truth. Shine my light both far and near. Shine my light both bright and clear. In every dark corner that I find, gonna let my little light shine. This light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. Every day, every day, every day, every day, gonna let my little light shine. Let it shine. All right, Gary. Huh?
Let's gather together. Come close, everybody. Let's put our arms around each other. All the people in the back come up and...
We all know how we ended camp.
Start closing. Our
Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya. Oh, Lord, kumbaya.
Someone singing, my Lord, kumbaya. Someone singing, my Lord, kumbaya. Someone singing, my Lord, kumbaya.
Oh, Lord, kumbaya.
Kumbaya. Someone's laughing. Someone's laughing, my Lord. Kumbaya. Someone's laughing, my Lord.
Kumbaya. Oh, Lord, kumbaya. Someone's loving. Someone's loving, my Lord. Kumbaya. Someone's loving, my Lord. Kumbaya. Janie's gotta get a plane. Someone's loving the Lord. Kumbaya. Oh, Lord, kumbaya. There's coffee and cake.